Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX14 Walsh and welcome to some more Gran Turismo Sport, a racing game developed by Polyphony Digital and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment for the PlayStation 4. Focusing on the game's online mode, known as Sport Mode, in this episode I take a look at my performance in the 8th race of the 2019 Manufacturer Series pre-season, which was held at the Suzuka circuit. This was a race in the Group 3 category, with my vehicle being the BMW Motorsport M3 GT. With that, let's get racing. Taking a look at the grid then, you'll see that I've qualified 6th out of 20 drivers, all as being of the driver rating C. My story for qualifying was a very good one, I feel, in that I managed to match my reference qualifying lap in my practice sessions of a 202.8, and I was surprised how far up the grid that lap took me. I was expecting to be on the bottom end of the top 10 or just outside of the top 10, but to be in 6th, I felt I was on course for a good set of points and therefore a good result. Now as for my race strategy, over the 9 lap distance I'll be splitting it into 2 stints, the first one being a longer 5 lap stint and the second one being a shorter 4 lap stint. My focus here was on tyre wear, not fuel management. With regards to fuel, I could go from start to end of the race over the 9 lap distance without having to worry about any fuel saving whatsoever, so you'll see that I'll be doing none at all. I'll be running the car in the maximum power fuel setting of number 1. As for tyre wear, completely different story. We had the option of the racing soft or the racing medium. I found the racing soft tyres were brilliant for qualifying, but over race distance I could only get them to last 3.5 laps before I really felt them struggling to keep grip of the circuit, so I had to default to the racing medium tyre, and I found with a little bit of conservative driving towards the end of the first stint I could get them to last 5 laps, and that would mean that I could approach the second stint with less fuel in the car, a fresh set of tyres, and be more aggressive in that second stint and try to make up places that I'd lost through driving a bit more conservatively over the course of the first stint, or hunt down those places ahead where drivers had gone for that shorter first stint and were trying to make it the end with more worn tyres in the second stint. So a lot to play for, a lot to think about, but the thing that was also on my mind was Suzuka. Wonderful circuit, great mixture of corners and straights, but on the outside the majority of the corners there were green paint strips which offer no grip whatsoever, and if you get one tyre on those green paint strips you normally end up drifting off the track or spinning the car out if you tried to put the power down whilst the wheel was on the paint. So I had to worry about that, and I'd worked as hard as possible in my practice to avoid that happening. Now as we're about to get underway, I'm going to be switching to the radar setting because a number of these corners provided ample overtaking opportunities for myself and other drivers, and I want to try and race as cleanly as possible. And as we're coming through then to begin the race, going out Casio Triangle, so turn 16, 17 and then into turn 18, the right hand where we build up speed going onto the main straight, will be go, go, go in 3, 2, 1 and away. You can see straight away I'm going to be tucking in behind the Aston Martin in front, trying to get a little bit of a distant toe from them to build up some additional speed, coming down into turn 1 and get as close as possible to them, whilst at the same time trying to pull as much distance as possible from the Mercedes behind. As we're going to turn 1 here, I've got a bit more speed than I'm used to, about 4 miles per hour than I'm used to, and I go a bit deep into turn 1, and as a result of that I go wide on the corner, end up on the green paint, and remember what I said about the green paint? Well, here we go. I spin out. Now as I roll into the centre of the track here, I have to get myself back underway. Unfortunately, a fellow M3 GT, as they go through my phased car, they lose grip of their car, or they lose control of their car I should say, and that causes them to spin off. I apologise, that's my fault entirely. And now I've really got to work on a recovery job here. What would have been a very aggressive Volkswagen Beetle behind who's going to push for this position, and now I've got to try and get as close as possible to the Ford Mustang in front and look to start overtaking. Get a little bit of a punt there off of the Volkswagen, but I keep it under control as they potentially look to go around the outside of myself at turn 7, but it's not going to happen. The grip's not there for them to do so, at least in my opinion. Now we're coming into the first of the 2 Degner curves, turn 8 and then turn 9. Here's number 8, and then second Degner's coming up a right hand turn here. And what I was thinking at this point is, right, put behind you everything that happened over the course of that first corner. What happened, happened. You'll learn from that mistake, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. For now, we're racing. Let's keep to the mantra of the first stint being the longest stint where we've got to conserve our tyres, and the second stint is where we can really make up the ground if possible and just get a result out of this. Let's get back into the top 10 and see how far we can reach. If we can get back into 6th, that'll be wonderful. If we can get into that top 10, we'll be damn proud of ourselves. So here we go then, following the Mustang, race mode. And we can see up in our rear view mirror at the moment, the Volkswagen really goes for a deep lunge at the last moment. Unfortunately, that caught me by surprise as I went to turn into the corner, so it will look as though I blocked them off. I can assure you it wasn't intentional. I would say it's a racing incident. They went for a move from very far back. At the same time, I should have been more alert to them coming perhaps and giving them the space on the inside to make that lunge. But so be it, we're racing still. Nobody's lost time. The Volkswagen's pulled back by about 1 second now. So 1.1 seconds, 1.2 seconds as we come through 130R. And as we go into the final chicane here, I'm going to go for the inside of this Audi because I feel more confident on the brakes compared to them. Get my car up the inside, give them room on the left hand side, but as we come through 17, I get pushed off the track. And as a result, it means I have to gradually bring myself back on, not making the mistake of lighting the tyres up too early on that green strip. We had the Audi R8, a second one trying to come around the outside of us in turn 18 there. We managed to hold them off as now they're under pressure from a Hyundai, but we're down into 15. So our recovery job's just increased a bit, albeit the Audi that sent us off at turn 17 has picked up a 5-second penalty for their actions. And so we do have to keep that in mind as we're trying to hunt them and the Volkswagen in front down. And those two are fighting one another for 13th place at this point. As we see behind our rear view mirror, it looks as though the Audi R8 that was on R6 has spun out in turn 1, making the same mistake that I did originally on lap number 1. So we don't have to worry about them, and the Hyundai behind is a distant fellow at the moment at 1 second away. They may be getting a bit closer in the near future, or they may be falling back. We'll just have to monitor that situation as we go. As we get on the power here, coming out of turn 6, up into 7 then, setting a purple sector. Very happy about this. Means I was starting to get into the rhythm that I practiced over the course of my practice race runs of doing the S-curve, so turns 3 through to 7, and I felt as though, right, it's really a case now of just settling down. We've had a lot of action, let's settle down and get on with the job. And what I'm going to try and do is get as close as possible to the Volkswagen in front. Now, one or two of you may be wondering at this point, well, how do you deal, as we see somebody's actually spun off at the hairpin to turn 11 there, so we're picking up another place, we're up into 14th now. How does one deal with the fact as they get closer and closer to the guys in front, really pushing them when you're trying to conserve your own tyres? Well, really, I just want to put the guys in front under pressure because mistakes were common in this race. We've already seen a good number of mistakes, some from myself, you're going to see more from myself later on. But on top of that, other drivers as well. So I take a peek at the inside of the Volkswagen there, but I don't go fully for it. I don't want to commit. I just want them to know I'm there right behind them. So that way, if they do decide to defend, it's going to cost them some race pace and bring me even closer to them. And I can use their slipstream to pull me along the back straight here as I go past the Mercedes in 13th. Picking up 13th there in 12th, now coming up into 11th as a number of drivers had to pick up penalties there on the main straight, costing a lot of time. Now we come through 130 up right on the back of the Volkswagen, and again, being in their slipstream, carrying a bit too much speed, but get it under control nicely rather than go charging off the track. Don't gain any time for it because I lifted off a bit, and we come through the Casio triangle here, the chicane, and then into turn 18 to wrap up lap number 2, and we're already back up into 11th, so it's a good job so far. I was feeling motivated at this point, so keep going, there's more places in this. We can see 10th, we can see 9th, we can just about see 8th up in the distance heading towards turn 1. We're nowhere out of the race yet, come on, keep going. And by staying behind the Volkswagen and putting pressure on them, it means I can force them or encourage them to use more of their tyres up, and that means that they're going to struggle more and more towards the end of their first stint, and they may have to change their strategy as a result. Perhaps they were looking to do 5 laps on their opening set of tyres like myself, and then do 4 laps on the second stint. Well, imagine if I can cause them to have to switch their strategy because they just can't keep up with the pressure and they have to come in early and shorten that first stint. That would be wonderful because it makes their race very difficult on the second stint. But anyway, reading back a little bit now from the Volkswagen, they've got away a bit. They've got the better grip by looks of things and the better overall speed going through the technical section of the S-curves, so turns 3 to 7. As we come through the 2 Degners now, so first Degner here and then going into second Degner for turn 9, you can see I'm really gaining on the guys in front through this section, and I will be over the second half of the circuit. I felt that's where my strength was, in the second half of the circuit, whereas in the first half I had to be sensible with the car and really manage the tyre wear and manage how much power I was really putting through the wheels. But now in first gear here we can really light the rear end up and go charging up into turn 12 here and up towards spoon curves for turns 13 and 14. The Beetle's getting a little bit closer at this point, just outside of the 1 second window to start really feeling the effects of the slipstream. Now 0.9 seconds, we're going to be feeling that distant toe here, braking just before the 50 board, coming down into third gear here. Building up a little bit of power and then braking once again, dropping down to second gear. Not tight on the curb here, but keeping a decent line through so we can get on the power, going a little bit sideways there, too early on the power. Perhaps should have just squeezed it a little bit more lightly, the throttle. But still, we haven't lost too much time, 1.2 seconds back, but we have to keep in mind as well the Volkswagen in front is getting the benefit of the slipstream off of the chap in 9th place, whereas I'm not. so that means I'm holding on to the back of them through my own race pace right now. As we can see in front, it looks as though an Audi's gone off the track at 130R, and that means that they're going to be quite close to the Volkswagen to make a move on them as they come on to start lap number 4, and I want to try and exploit that because these guys are going to be fighting, so one of them is potentially going to take a defensive line going into turn 1. That's going to slow these two guys down, and I can be right in the mix and right on the back of them. And again, it's not about necessarily fighting for positions right now because I've got nobody behind me that's close behind. 12th place is the Mercedes we saw earlier, who's 3.7 seconds behind, so I've got nothing to worry about behind. I can just enjoy the spectacle that is these two guys fighting in front, and I can get closer and closer and potentially make a move if one of them makes a mistake or an opportunity presents itself where I've just got the stronger pace going through a given corner or a given section of the circuit. But for now in the S-curves, I'm going to just stay behind them because I've got to keep an eye on that tyre wear. Looking in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen right now, you'll see that my front tyres are down to roughly 60% of their remaining availability. And so I don't want to push them too hard because once they start getting down to the region of 50%, which is where they're going to be on lap number 5, that's where they become a real pain and my lap time really drops off. You can see that the guys in front are getting a little bit jittery, and they both make the same mistake in first egg here of both going wide. That costs the Audi their position as I go through and benefit, and I'm right on the back of the Volkswagen now, and I'm thinking, you know what, I've got speed on you, I'm going to try and take a shot going into the hairpin if you give me the room to do so. As you can see, following them in here, I look at the outside line, then I switch into the inside line as they go a little bit deep on the brakes here. Must be honest, don't give them enough room as we come out of the hairpin there, and they go into the side of me. That's my fault. I should have kept a tighter line and not just extended the car out. I can assure you that based on what you would have seen on screen, I didn't open the steering as such. Tried to keep the steering as tight as possible, but because of the way I'd angled myself for the corner, that meant I cut off their return line on the corner. That's why they went to the side of me. So a bit of bad play for me there, but hopefully hasn't upset them too much, and I apologise in advance. But as we go charging through here into the back straight once again, we're now chasing down 8th position. We're up into 9th and feeling good about ourselves at this point. In terms of the way I was feeling as we're going through the race distance, it's like, hey, you know what, 6th isn't that far away. If we can get close to 8th, then surely the other positions are only just going to be up the road. But of course, one thing we have to consider now is that people will start to pit, and this is where things start to jumble as everybody's on different strategies, and we start to see who's got the better race pace, who's picked the right strategy, etc. As I go past the pit entrance here and go for lap number 5 on the heavily worn set of racing mediums now. Switching over to the fuel map, just making sure I haven't realised any unforeseen circumstances, got ample fuel to get to the end of the race, and we come out along here just behind the Aston Martin who's just come out of the pits, and what we can see is that they're in a different race now. They were in our race to begin with until we made our mistake on turn 1, but I can't chase them down. They've got greater grip and they're just going to disappear off into the distance very shortly, so they're out of arm's reach. But the chap at the moment who's in 5th is definitely not out of arm's reach because they're on the same strategy as myself by the looks of things, so perhaps we can get closer and closer to them towards the second stint. As we come through then the final of the S-curves here, going through Dunlop curve now into Degner curve number 1. Coming back to that initial mistake, so the one thing I need to learn from on that initial mistake I made, lap 1, turn 1, is that when I'm close behind someone going into a high speed corner, the slipstream effect I get off of them gives me more speed, and when I carry more speed, I need to realise that that speed is going to change the line I can take through the corner if I try to use my standard braking point or my standard turning point. So instead, I need to think about changing my braking on my turning point to account for the additional speed I've got, and that's something that I will learn over time. It's not something that I've worked on because, of course, when you're not racing against other people and you're driving around the circuit in a practice session by yourself, which is how I practice, you don't have that experience. But over time, it's something I will now look to improve through the successive races. As we come through the final part of Spoon Curve here, turn 14, return to the action on screen. And getting a little bit sideways once again, coming out of turn 14, doesn't cost us too much time, but we can see the Aston Martin in front is just charging off now. And we're just coming through into 130R. You'll see that I do lift and do a little bit of braking as well, just before the 100 board. Pardon me. And that's to make sure that the car doesn't end up drifting onto the paint. Stay on the track. Just going to come through the Casio Triangle chicane now and come into the pit. So I won't be too aggressive as I come out of turn 17 into 18. You'll see that I initially get on the power, but then I lift off and just tuck the car into the pit. Make no errors here and put on a fresh set of racing mediums. The guys are ready to do the pit stop. Quite a bit of time spent in the pits here, as you can see the pit time at the top centre of your screen. This pit lane was quite costly in terms of time. In terms of what I was expecting to come out, having gone in 7th place, I was expecting to come out in say 8th or 9th. And I thought to myself, based on the distance I have between myself and the guys behind, who have just pitted as well, I'd be coming out in fresh air most likely. And looking at the map right now, we can see that we're coming out keeping on the right hand side of the white line, keeping on the pit exit line. And you see we've come out just in front of what looks to be that Ford Mustang that we're able to get past earlier, as they go quite deep into turn 2 here, and that's perfect because what this means now is with the fresher tyres and less fuel in the car, I can pull away from the Mustang behind unless they're really aggressive over the course of this first lap, and I can start to hunt down the chap in 7th place, and I can start to push for those final positions that I want to regain. However, in going into a more aggressive driving style now, there's something one has to consider, and that is when you go from driving in a conservative fashion to being more aggressive with the car and less fuel in the car, so therefore the greater potential pace. That means that the lines you take through corners, and I found this as you're going to see now with this race, the lines you take through corners start to mutate a little bit in the fact that because you've got a bit more speed in the car, your line does change. You start to have to use more of the track if you weren't doing so already, and that can cost you some time if you don't anticipate it. Now this first lap on the fresh set of tyres in stint number 2 is working very well so far, and I haven't made any mistakes, and we can see the gap between myself and the Ford Mustang behind is now opening up to 2 seconds. I'm 5 seconds down, however, on a 7th place. They're doing a very good job having come out of the pits of putting some distance between myself and them. So I'm going to need to drive even more aggressively in order to be able to catch up to them. And what you're starting to see as we come through Spoon Curve is that I went over the curve of turn 13 and put 2 wheels on the grass. Hasn't cost us any time as such, but I'm starting to get more ragged in my driving style, and that's going to start to reflect as we go through the next couple of laps how I approach things such as the S-curves, and perhaps that's really going to cost me quite a bit of time. And we can see that 7th place has already got to 5.7, 5.8 seconds away from myself, so they are really pulling away. They're doing a fantastic job of driving the wheels off of their car. So perhaps we may have to settle for 8th place, but I thought to myself, you know what, keep on going because you never know what may happen. We've seen so many mistakes over the course of this race so far. We've seen so many incidents, anything could happen over the course of the last 3 laps as we come onto lap number 7. And that gap already to 7th place has now dropped to 5.2 seconds. What on earth is going on? See, straight away, as time goes on and the situations change, it may be the case that I can get 7th, so we're not out of the woods yet. As we come around turn number 2 here, decent line, one of the better approaches I've taken to that corner throughout the course of this race. We're now going to the S-curves here in 3rd gear, just keeping the car in 3rd gear all the way along, but this is where the driving gets a bit rugged and scrappy, and I'm missing the apex of the corners, missing the tight lines, and this is all adding up to cost me tiny little bits of time, which then add up over the course of a lap to cost me a lot of time as I get onto the grass there, coming out of turn 6, and that means that I have to lift out going into turn 7. I can take a better line through 7, but I've lost the time that I was starting to gain on 7th place, as it looks as though 6th and 7th have actually changed position now, and we've got another Frenchman we're chasing after 5.7 seconds away, as we drift sideways from getting 1 wheel on the grass going into the second Degner there, and that's cost me half a second that I was already starting to gain on them. In fact, it looks as though it's about 7/10 of a second, and now there's even more work to do. And that's something I'll need to work on as well, is that when I go into a race and I have to drive in a sort of conservative mode for the first stint of the race, and then when I go into the second stint of the race and I drive more aggressively, I need to practice driving aggressively but driving cleanly, because otherwise all that aggression is just going to end up costing me as much time as I'm trying to gain, if not costing me more time than I'm trying to gain, as you're seeing right now, with the gap between myself and 7th place now up to 7 seconds. But we're bringing it back now, 6.8 seconds as we come onto the back straight here. You can see the gap between myself and 9th place is 7 seconds. They're not going to catch us at all unless we make a major error or they suddenly pull something out of the bag with 2 and a bit laps remaining, which I don't expect to happen. As we go into 130R, we initially lift and then get back on the power as we come out the corner here. Could perhaps got on the power a little bit earlier, but I wanted to just play it safe. And now we're going to the final chicane to bring lap number 7 to a close. And we can see as well that in terms of lap times now, the lap times are really starting to come down, particularly the fastest lap going to the Russian in the M6, who qualified just ahead of us, I remember, on the grid, them doing a 2-minute lap flat, a 2-minute.5. And as we go charging forward into lap number 8, just taking it easy through turn number 1 and then going into turn number 2. You can see we're settling in, getting a little bit wobbly under the brake and going into turn number 2. We're making the most of the track here. A little bit wide going onto the exit curve of turn number 2, but now we're going to be tightening the line up as we go through the S-curves here, and we're starting to regain that sense of momentum, that sense of smooth driving that we had in the opening stint of the race. Unfortunately, the gap between myself and 7th place isn't coming down at the moment, it's 6.7 seconds, so we'll just have to keep pushing and see what comes and happens in that last lap and a half as we come into the second half of lap number 8. Going through Degner 1 then, and then into Degner 2. Having the radar setting still open because it's really the only setting I need open at this point. Taking Degner 2 very sharp in on the curve, just about keeping 2 wheels on the track on the white lines. so we don't pick up a penalty there. You could get away with that, but I didn't feel too confident of doing it every single time, so I thought I'd throw it in there just to see if I could gain a little bit of time. And my goodness, it looks as though whoever it was quite far up, in fact whoever's now in 7th, the Russian in the BMW M6, has made a major mistake at some point, because we weren't following them originally, but now they're only 5 seconds away from us. And perhaps it's a case that they've been trying to make a set of tyres last all the way to the end of the race, and it's not working out for them. Who knows? But what I do know is there's the potential to pick up 7th place here. I've just got to drive some clean laps. As we get on the power here coming out to turn 14, don't get the car sideways this time. Now we're coming up behind the back marker, going onto the back straight and up towards 130R. They're already doing the sensible thing. They're keeping their eyes open, keeping over to the left hand side of the track, albeit I'm not too close enough in order to be able to get past them yet. As we lift going into 130R, getting nice and tight on the curb there and finishing off the corner. Could have been on the power a bit more aggressively. And we now come into the final chicane once again to begin our final lap. Getting over the curves there and getting past the back marker, who was phased out anyway, but good job on them for backing off and letting us through. And now, as we start the final lap, we can see it's only 4.4 seconds between us and 7th place, and that time does seem to be dropping. Perhaps they really are on a worn set of tyres. There is an opportunity to get them here, perhaps, if they make another set of mistakes. So going into turn number 1 then, down to 4th, down to 3rd for turn number 2. Just gradually coming on the throttle here gently as we finish off turn number 2. Could have perhaps been a bit more aggressive to use greater space of the track, but not to worry as we go into the S-curves. Turn 3, just gently on the throttle going through turn 4 here, not getting too wide and carrying that momentum through, swinging the car into turn number 5 and then back into 6 from left into right. And we can see that by managing in 3rd, getting just a little bit of throttle, keeping it a decent line, and as we go up into 7 here, the gap between myself and the BMW M6 has not dropped at all. It's maintained at the point of 4.3 and now it's starting to drop to 4.2 as we go into Degner 1 and then into Degner 2. The Degner curves here, going down to 3rd gear, getting on the power and then going into turn number 2 and not getting a wheel on the grass this time, going a little bit deep into the corner but not costing us too much time, and we can see that gap is dropping. It's now 2.7 seconds. That BMW has made a mistake at some point. Now we come up into the hairpin here, going down into 2nd gear, want to try and avoid any wheel spin at first, now going down to 1st gear and getting fully on the power. And straight up into 2nd gear as well to avoid the wheel spin by being in 1st gear, which can happen. And now just chasing this BMW who's 1.5 seconds away. They're so tantalisingly close and we're almost on their slipstream. We're going to keep hunting them down until the very end. Going into spoon curve then, turn 13, braking just before the 50 ball, down to 3rd gear. Getting on the power, coming up into 14, getting down into 2nd gear here. Taking a reasonably tight line, getting a little bit sideways as we get on the power, but keeping it under control there. Unfortunately, the BMW in front get a clean line out there, so we're not able to close the gap down at all at this point. It's still 1.5 seconds. It's 8 seconds almost between myself and 9th, so forget about 9th. They don't exist as far as I'm concerned right now. And we're now coming to 130R, lifting at the 100 ball, taking it easy. And as soon as we come around, getting on the brakes a little bit because I didn't feel too settled with the line. Poor line there. Now coming up into the final chicane, it looks as though the BMW M6 is just about to hold on to 7th place. And the guys in front in 6th and 5th have made some errors by looks of things, fighting against one another. I'm just not close enough to capitalise, whereas the M6 was able to get in front of in front of the Beetle, but still bringing the M3 GT home in an 8th place. Whilst I was initially kicking myself for the silly mistake I made right at the start of this race, taking me from 6th all the way down to 15th, at the same time I was quite pleased at the recovery job I conducted, going back from 15th up into 8th and being right on the heels of 7th, 6th and 5th as we went across the finish line. I think I made a good recovery in the end, and this being my first ever recovery race, I think this propels me even more forward towards future races where I have to do a recovery job, and now I have a feel of what having to do a recovery race looks like. On the other side of the coin, however, I do need to work on racing behind other drivers in terms of getting used to how my car's characteristics change slightly in terms of grip and speed in a straight line when I'm running in somebody else's slipstream, and how that can potentially affect my braking points or my turning points going into corners, so that way the mistake I made today right at the beginning will not happen again, or the likelihood of it happening will be reduced significantly. But all in all, a positive result, tons to learn from, and upwards and onwards to race 9 on Autopolis International Racing Course Circuit this Wednesday. The final race in the Group 4 category will be bringing out the M4 again one last time. Thank you for watching. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like, comment or subscribe for future episodes. As always, I've been TX141, and until next time, take care.